Was it just a random phrase? Or did Mark Webber just open the door for Oscar Piastri to go to Ferrari? Is McLaren about to lose its brightest diamond? The season was over. The Abu Dhabi lights went out, but the real earthquake was just beginning. When everything seemed to stabilize after a championship that left Oscar Piastri in third position in the World Championship, Mark Webber appeared. Not with an official statement, not with an incendiary tweet. He did it as those who know how to pull strings from the shadows do, with a short, indirect phrase but loaded with meaning. He said Piastri should start improving his Italian. And that was enough. Those who understand Formula One beyond the surface got the message immediately. In this sport, learning Italian is not a tourist recommendation. It's a key, a symbol, an address. It is looking towards Maranello, towards Scuderia Ferrari. And that changes everything. To the general public, it may seem like a simple anecdote. But inside the paddock, that statement is dynamite. Because what Webber hinted at was not a future possibility. What he did was open the door, issue a challenge, set limits. He said without saying it that Oscar Piastri is not married to McLaren. That the Woking project is not its inevitable destiny. That if things don't change, if the driver is not treated as what he is, a central figure, a serious contender for the title, then they will look elsewhere. And that place has a name, history and color. Ferrari. The Abu Dhabi Grand Prix was not just the last race of the 2025 championship. It was, in many ways, a sentence. A confirmation of what had been beating under the surface at McLaren for months. A season finale that should have been epic due to the sporting context, ended up revealing a deep crack within a team that, although successful, is far from stable. Oscar Piastri arrived at Yas Marina as one of 3 contenders for the world title. Lando Norris led the championship with 12 points ahead of Max Verstappen and 16 over Piastri himself. The setting was tense, perfect for the story. A 3-way duel with 2 McLaren cars fighting for the championship. For any team, that would be a source of pride. But for McLaren, it was a logistical, political, and emotional nightmare. From the pit wall, the managers knew that any decision they made would be viewed with a magnifying glass. And yet, they chose one path, giving team orders if the situation required it. Zak Brown was blunt, it would be crazy not to. But in that supposed clarity, the real conflict was hidden. Because the problem was never what was said, but what was done, or what was not done, when it mattered. On the first lap of the race, Oscar Piastri passed Lando Norris in turn 9. He did it cleanly, without contact, with authority. It was not an improvised maneuver. According to Andrea Stella, it was prearranged. It was part of the plan. Piastri, by starting with hard tires, would have better pace management in the first laps and should try to put pressure on Verstappen. Norris, with the means, had to facilitate this attempt without resisting. That was executed. But only that. What came next was silence, inaction, strategic ambiguity. Despite being in direct contention for the title and having pace, Piastri did not receive any type of subsequent tactical support. While Verstappen executed a perfect race for Red Bull, maximizing every centimeter of the track and every second in the pits, McLaren seemed frozen. There was no undercut. There was no overcut. There were no aggressive pit maneuvers to give the Australian the advantage. It was as if his position on the track was just another decoration for the circuit, not a real threat to the title. The most striking thing is that even after his stop on lap 41, when he installed medium tires and began to reduce time with a higher pace, the team did not react. Piastri was gaining lap time, getting close to Verstappen. But there was no type of support from the radio. Nor was there any attempt to move Norris's strategy to allow Piastri to approach in clear air. Nor was anything sacrificed from the other car to increase the Australians' chances. It was a race managed on autopilot. Let's see what happens, when what was needed was a plan to win. The contrast was brutal. Red Bull, despite being alone with Verstappen in contention, showed absolute tactical conviction. Ferrari, even without real chances, pressed with Leclerc to take advantage of any opportunity. Only McLaren seemed not to want to win. He seemed to be more concerned about not appearing unfair than being ambitious. And that was exactly what set off alarm bells for Mark Webber. The sporting context makes it even more bloody. Piastri was the most consistent in the second half of the season. He took points where there were none. He won when he had to win. And he arrived with options for the last race. He did everything well. But in Abu Dhabi, it became clear that this was not enough. In his statements after the race, Piastri himself was diplomatic. He said he hadn't thought about what was coming yet, that he needed time to digest it. But between the lines there was a contained tension. When a driver works hard for an entire season and feels that the team is not taking a chance on him at the decisive moment, it is impossible that there are no consequences. And then came Las Vegas, a new circuit full of uncertainty where each team had to be more flexible than ever. And McLaren again failed. Piastri started with real podium options. The MCL 39's pace was competitive and its handling of urban traffic was impeccable. But the strategy ruined everything again. This time the error was in the stop window reading. They called him to the pits too early, looking for an undercut that made no sense given the tire conditions and the evolution of the track. He was thrown back into the race in heavy traffic, with compounds that did not allow him to advance aggressively. The result was another wasted race. Another lost podium. More points delivered without fighting. And above all, another silent message that resonated deeply in Piastri's environment, that its strategic interests were not being protected. And this is where the figure of Mark Webber comes in most strongly. Because if in Abu Dhabi there was silence on the part of the team, in Qatar and Las Vegas there were active decisions. Tactical choices that clearly hurt him. And Webber, who knows the importance of every point in a tight season, couldn't ignore it. Not when its driver was fighting for a championship. Not when he had earned every opportunity with work and results. To casual fans, these incidents may seem part of F1's natural volatility. But for an elite driver, and especially for an experienced manager, each of these decisions leaves a mark. In confidence, in emotional stability, in the perception of mutual commitment. And that's what really hurt in those two races, not the specific failure but the accumulation. The feeling that the team that was supposed to lift you to the title was instead sabotaging your chances with unforced errors. In Qatar, passivity. In Las Vegas, impatience. In both cases, Piastri was the victim of a misreading of the moment. And while that was happening, his teammate Lando Norris, although also affected at times, more frequently received the right decisions, the fair stops, the cleaner attack windows, that did not go unnoticed by anyone, and less so for Webber. Qatar and Las Vegas are more than races. They are evidence. They are evidence in the internal file that is being used today to pressure McLaren. Because if the Woking team wants to keep its Australian jewel, it will have to do more than just talk about internal equality. You will have to prove it on the track. And until now, the scales have been unbalanced. What happened in those two races changed the narrative. It was no longer the story of the young pilot developing. It was the story of a title contender being slowed down by his own team. It was the beginning of an awkward conversation. One that ended with a poisonous phrase, "You should improve your Italian." Because after Qatar and Las Vegas, that phrase no longer sounds like a symbolic message. Sounds like a plan in motion. After the echo of Mark Webber's words, the big question hung in the air with a brutal intensity. Is it just an empty warning, or is there really a real possibility that Oscar Piastri will end up dressed in red under the sacred roof of Maranello? Are we facing a media pressure strategy, or are we facing the first steps of a great migration in the pilot market? And here comes the second layer of the conflict: internal psychology. What happens in a team when one of its drivers begins to look outside? How do you maintain motivation, harmony, cohesion? The answer is simple: it is not maintained. The mere possibility of an exit weakens the internal structure. Create distrust. And in an environment where milliseconds make a difference, any distraction is costly. Webber knows this. He is not simply testing the waters. You are measuring the response. He's watching how Zach Brown, Andrea Stella, and McLaren's top brass react. He is waiting for signs that his pilot will be prioritized. That they will treat him not just as a good number 2, but as a legitimate number 1. Today, Piastri is still a McLaren driver. But your environment no longer thinks like you. Webber, with a symbolic phrase, has opened a door. The question is not whether that door leads to Ferrari. The question is whether McLaren will be able to close it before it's too late. Is Oscar Piastri being unfairly treated within McLaren? Is this a simple strategic dispute? Or are we witnessing the beginning of an irreparable fracture? Should McLaren redefine its priorities, its internal culture, its way of managing success, before losing the driver who could sustain its future? Leave it in the comments what you think about all this.